Good morning, everybody. We are giving a few more minutes for Zoom to populate the webinar, and then we will get started. We're happy to have you with us today. You will also have the option to enable closed captioning if you need. If you look near the bottom of your screen, close by to where the Q&A buttons are, then you should have the option of enabling captions. We'll give just one more minute before we get started. All right. I know that folks will continue to join our webinar, but we will get started. Hello and welcome to Learn to Draw Water with John Muir Laws. We are so happy that all of you are joining us today. Today's class is hosted by the Wild Wonder Foundation, which John Muir Laws has co-founded. The Wild Wonder Foundation is dedicated to encouraging nature connection and conservation through attention, curiosity, art, science, and community. We strive to make nature and nature journaling accessible to everyone through many opportunities, such as sponsoring the annual Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference and other events, educational workshops, field trips, teacher trainings, retreats, exhibits, grants, and further activities and projects in support of our mission, like our class today. You can learn more about our work at wildwonder.org. We are so grateful to today's teacher, John Muir Laws, also known as Jack, who is an award-winning author, writer, illustrator, and expert educator with nearly 4 decades of teaching experience. Jack is the co-founder and president of the Wild Wonder Foundation, and he is the author and illustrator of the Laws Guide to Nature Drawing and Journaling, the Laws Guide to Drawing Birds, the Laws Sketchbook, and many others. He is donating his time today to teach this class, so thank you, Jack. I see thumbs up. This is a 2-hour fundraiser class. The proceeds from today's class will go toward the Wild Wonder Micro Grant Program, which will debut in 2024. We ask participants to use the Q&A rather than the chat for any questions or concerns. Meanwhile, the moderators will use the chat to share important information. Thank you to Ivea and Anne-Marie, who are helping backstage with the class management. So you will also know we will take a quick break at 11, a quick hydration break. This is, as I mentioned, a 2-hour class, and your camera and mic will be disabled. I now hand it over to you, Jack.
Thank you so much, Ivea. Folks, I am delighted that all of you are with us today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for supporting the Wild Wonder Foundation. And I'm really, really looking forward to playing with water with you. Water, let's just sort of think about water for a second. We're on this planet that's what, maybe 70% water in our little meat sacks that are maybe 60% water. So water is everywhere, and it is really, really, really weird. Water is like this emergent property of little covalent bonds on hydrogen molecules. And because of the properties of that, life is possible on this planet. And if those things bonded in a different way, water wouldn't be, but we just take it for granted. And it's extremely cool. So The next time you're taking a sip of water, maybe just take a moment to reflect on you are sipping something incredible. And including water into our journals is wonderful because it connects us with a sense of place. But it's also sometimes challenging because water is this moving enigma thing, and it plays with the light. It's like this moving mirror that is sometimes translucent and sometimes not, and is just so much fun. So I want to encourage people to start looking for water and to play with water on the pages of your journal. Play with this little kind of crazy emergent property. And let's see. Oh, I meant to start off, and since we're still starting off, let's start off just with a little Mary Oliver moment, because it's just another reflection on how amazing water is. So this is a poem. It's a short poem by the poet Mary Oliver, and it's called "At Blackwater Pond." And sort of the backstory on this is that as part of her daily practice and meditation, Mary Oliver would regularly go out on these walks in the mornings and go to Blackwater Pond, and she would stop and she would drink from the pond. And I guess this continued until everybody found out, like, oh, Mary Oliver's going for walks at Blackwater Pond in the morning. Let's go meet Mary Oliver. And then she had to kind of change up her routine to get a little bit of solitude. But this is one of the poems that came from that. And so she writes, "At Blackwater Pond, the tossed waters have settled after a night of rain. I dip my cupped hands. I drink a long time. It tastes like stone, leaves, fire. It falls cold into my body, waking the bones. I hear them deep inside me, whispering, oh, what is that beautiful thing that just happened?" What is that beautiful thing that just happened? If we could remember that each time we take a sip of water, I think the way we would walk on this planet, it would be a different thing. And how beautiful is that? So let's play with how do we explore this in our nature journals. And what I'm going to do is I've got a number of I've sorted and organized some photographs, and I'll be showing those on one side of your screen, and then on the other side of the screen I have you'll be able to see my drawing tablet, and I'm going to be showing you some techniques and approaches to getting sketches and drawings of water. For how to write our water poetry, we're going to have to rely on other members of our community. Bonus challenge, as we're kind of going along in this workshop here, if you can, during this workshop, write a water haiku, drop that into the chat and just share it with everybody else. I think that could be a lot of fun. We'll try not to have let's just play with that, see what happens. But remember, if you have any questions for us, the tech crew in the back, again, Anna Marie and Ivea, thank you so much for helping with the logistics behind the scenes. Put any challenges that you're having, like if you can't get the closed captioning to work, then put those in there, and whoop, and our amazing behind the scenes crew will take care of you. Now, just one other thing, and who knows what that was? So let's just go play with different views of water. We're going to use a whole bunch of different media. And so we'll be playing with some pencils and pens and watercolor and gouache and colored pencils. And we'll see what we can do. I'm going to be making a lot of little kind of mini landscape sketches today as we're doing this. And that is a strategy that I want to encourage you to play with. Sometimes if you're doing out in the field in your journal, if you try to do something really, really big, just like even doing a smooth wash across a really large area becomes a technically challenging thing to do. For a lot of our little nature journal studies, kind of little water studies, you may find you get you get refreshed just by putting in a little study, and you don't have to make it big on your page. Remember, the bigger you go, the more challenging that drawing will be. So that's why a lot of us nature journalists, we make these little landscape ethos, these tiny little sketches, and that is a really useful thing to do. Let me see here. We're going to go to share an alternate view. You'll give me a moment to change my camera. There we are. Vea, are you seeing water everywhere and a pad of white paper?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Give me a moment to change my microphones around in the back here. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right. Here we go. We are just going to start with some ripples. And if you take a look at ripples, what you've got is little kind of micro bends in the surface of the water. I mean, this alone is amazing. So water, the molecules, they bond with each other, they connect with each other. It's got a skin, and the skin of water has texture. And that texture shows up in the way that light plays with the water surface. So I'm just going to start with a pencil drawing here. Here I've got a mechanical pencil. And let's take a look at this. Look at the top of the screen here. Notice that at the top of the screen, there are short, skinny lines. Look down on the bottom of the screen. Notice that there are big, broad lines, big, longer lines, and they are thicker. So if I want to, in my sketch, have a drawing of ripples, the way I handle those is going to change. So water that is far away from me, or sort of actually, I'm going to even call this middle distance. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a series of horizontal lines. And what I'm trying to do is to be consistently inconsistent. So if I make them look like I am being too intentional, it is not going to feel right. So some places I'm going to press harder, some presses softer, but I'm back. Basically, I've got closely packed little lines. Sometimes it's a little dot. Sometimes it's more of a line. Sometimes it's a line that goes light, dark, light. Try that just over here. So go light, dark, light, light, dark, light, light, dark, light, dark, light. So I'm putting in just a few of just sort of variable lines like that. And again, consistently inconsistent is your trick. Now let's think of what is closer to you. These are, what I'm seeing here are broader lines. And I'm also can make these further apart. Even make that one longer. Again, consistently inconsistent. They can taper at the edges, taper at the corners. And then what do you do in between those? You can put in sort of a medium zone, but sometimes you'll see parts in the water where there are more ripples, parts in the water where there are fewer ripples. You don't even have to connect all these up together. And people will read this as being continuous water. But if I want, I can put in something that is sort of maybe a middle state in there, some medium length. And then people will read this as water going all the way up. Notice that I'm making these marks horizontal. Very often horizontal marks in water play very, very nicely. If there are any marks in the far background here, I'm probably just putting in one or two just horizontal lines, just saying that there's another little zone of darkness back there. So just with this pencil, that's a really useful way of thinking about ripples, how you are going to handle things in the foreground where I have more spacing between my lines and I have lines that are longer. And then I'm going to do something different in the background. Another thing you can do is you can add into this, if these are sort of smudged and smeared. Here I'm just going to take a little blender. Notice that that little blender makes the whole water surface darker. I filled in a bunch of the little kind of white paper spaces between things. Can then come in and in a few places here, add a little bit more darkness to some of these. But the other thing you can do then is this is a skinny eraser. This is called a mono zero. And what it is a little kind of pinpoint eraser that's sort of shaped like a pen. And I can come along and add a few little highlights to that. Highlights right next to, you're putting them above some of these marks. And then imagine that there's some wind blowing across the water here in the background. I can even come across here and just put in a whole distant line of light. This makes, again, this idea of consistently inconsistent. I have, so now several things going on here. I have my dark marks. I have the marks that are blended. And then I also have those white marks through those that I put in with a skinny eraser. There's a few brands of skinny erasers, but they're kind of a nice thing to have in your kit. Very often, if you just have, one big eraser, it gets sort of, it's such a blunt tool. But with this, you sort of feel like you're drawing with your little eraser. So that's one reason why I like those little tools. Not necessary, but you can see that if you have a soft pencil and a blending tool, then these little pencils come in really, really handy. Let's take a look at some more ripples, but just with a different kind of a medium. I often will, I bring a watercolor kit into the field with me. And when I do that, there are two brushes that I regularly use. This is a flat chisel-tipped water brush. This is a sharp, fine-tip water brush. So these have the water in their handles. And I am going to show you just a couple of little strategies with ripples with these. The first thing I would do is to Um, the first thing I would do is to put down just a little bit of color. So I'm going to look at this. This is sort of a blue-greeny color. So I'm going to get a little bit of bluish greeny color. And I'm taking this flat brush and just making a kind of quick back and forth mark here. I want to get that darker. I can let that dry and put in another coat of that. With these brushes, if you use it kind of lightly, then you can actually get a little bit of horizontal scratchy texture, and that gets a feeling of light and ripples going in there. So all I'm doing here, kind of get that effect, is let's just do that one more time. My brush is not very wet. Notice that my brush is kind of it's looking kind of scratchy out here. So I'm going to start here down at the bottom, and I'm just going to I'm going back and forth. And as I do that, my brush is running out of paint. And as it does, you know, it's going from darker to lighter. And I kind of like that effect.
Hey, Jack,
Yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we've had a couple of requests to see if it's possible to make your visualizer just a bit bigger.
great idea.
Oh, thank you.
How's that?
I think that's good. Yeah, I think that's okay. Yes, thank you.
Great.
If
Thank
I
you.
could, if I could add, Jack, can you make the photo smaller and the area you're working on larger? So I
Yes.
think that is would be helpful. Thanks.
Let's see here. Grab this and squeeze you over here. Oh, look, what's back there? Grab this and squeeze it over here. Grab this guy again and squeeze it over here. And there we are. How about that?
Excellent. Thanks, Jack.
All right. But so we've got already a few different sort of watermarks, but let's kind of have just a little bit more fun with this and kind of get this into a little bit more ripply texture. Let's think about things I can do with this brush to give me just a little bit more water texture, because I want to get some ripples in here, and this is also it's feeling pretty light. So I've got a little bit of this of dark paint in my tip of my brush here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a few kind of horizontal marks, and I'm kind of getting my brush tip here to kind of dance back and forth. I'm kind of making a zigzag back and forth, keeping this. So I'm going to just do this down on white paper here. I'm kind of going back and forth. Some things connected together, some things more separate from each other. And then this feels like we have, you know, some of these little waves in here. Out here in the back, I'm going to put in, I'm just going to tap it a few times, and I want that to be a little bit lighter. So I'm going to tap that with my finger, pick up some of that. I can also get wave-ish effects, ripply effects with this brush. And the way I'm going to do that is, this is kind of fun. Check this out. If I put my brush down lightly, Actually, I think that we may be seeing, is the focus level changing, Bea, as I am?
Yes, it keeps on trying to focus and then
Okay, so I am going to come over here to manual focus. Get it focus one time and then lock my focus.
that looks nice and clear.
Nice and clear. Okay. Great. So here I am. My hand might be partially out of focus, but we hope that it now stays on there. Look at this. So if I go lightly with the tip and then press and then lightly again, I get this little eyelashed mark. So a little press there, a little press there. I'm going to put into the foreground here. Some of these little eyelashed marks. Further back, I'm trying to do the same thing, but these are more closely packed and they're smaller. And further back, I'm just put in some kind of light lines here. I'm not intentionally pushing heavier, but just the instability of my hand sometimes makes a little bit of a darker mark. Another kind of fun watery effect, if you are if you're working with watercolor, is that watercolor doesn't like to make a mark if there's white colored pencil below it. So here I'm going to take I put some white pencil down here, and you can see this as this sort of settles out. You'll see a little bit of this white mark here kind of showing through. Imagine that there's a dark lake with sort of a beam of light sun coming through it. I'm going to take my white pencil here, and I'm going to put down this layer of wax. Here. And let's say it's fairly dark, so I'm going to mix up some. So I put it down, it gets covered up. And then I'm thinking like, oh, I want that to be brighter. But notice as we're sitting here, look at it get brighter. What's happening is that paint is retreating off of that wax in that little kind of reflection streak. And if I want it to be even brighter than that, this paint on top of here is now just sitting on top of some of this pencil. And that pencil doesn't let that wax kind of seep into the paper. I'm going to just take a clean brush here and with a little irregular mark kind of come up the middle of that. And there's that little reflection kind of coming down from a mark from the sun on a dark surface. Similarly, I could put in some little wavelets. With a consistently inconsistent mark. And then put my paint down, And as I sit and wait, you're going to see more of those little white pencil marks begin to show themselves through. I'm going to add a little bit more paint down in the bottom corner of it. And I'm getting these marks that feel, surprisingly, watery. Let's take a look at this sort of in the context of just a little mini landscapito. So these have just been some watery studies here. But let's say you're looking out at that landscape over there and you say like, oh, I want to do this. I want to play with this. How can I make this work? Let's play with some of these ripples. Notice that the ripple marks are bigger, closer to you, longer, closer to you. The spaces between them are bigger, closer to you. As you go back in the distance, you see more of these horizontal lines. In the far distance, there's just a big white streak and a line of dark water. And then we have our dark mountains. Dark mountains going up, oh my gosh, fading into fog and mist. How does water get into the air? That's another weird thing about water. Water's doing its water thing, and then it can travel into the air. Water can go up into the air. We just take that for granted. I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing. Pull out some of those. Oh, that's fun. So here's a little landscape drawing. And again, let's think of this with different media. So let's say you like to work with pencil. Let's start with pencil, and then let's also do a watercolory version of it. To make this easier for me, I am going to, so you've got this hill that kind of comes down. You've got your edgier water over there. There's a distant mountain. They're fading into the sky. With my pencil here, I'm going to, if this is the edge of this close thing, I'm going to put a little bit of detail in here.
Oh, Jack,
there we go.
There we go. We also have a question of what kind of paper are you using?
So this is I went to my local art supply store. I wanted a big pad of inexpensive paper. And this is Strathmore drawing paper. And here's the specs on that. 50 sheets. It's 70-pound paper. So this is not but it's got a little bit of tooth to it, and the price is right. So I'm just going to put some vertical marks here into this distant mountain. The reason I'm putting vertical marks into this distant mountain is that I want it to be contrasted with the plane of the water. I want the people who look at this to say like, oh, those mountains are different than your water. Back here, is those more distant mountains. And then we're going to fade them up into the sky. In the sky, I've got a little bit of gunk here on my brush, on this. I'm just going to fade these edges into the sky. And now let's think about that water. All right. Down here on this edge, I'm going to give ourselves a kind of a tighter crisper edge along the shore. And my water is roughly mirroring the shape of this. It is coming down here, and dark marks coming over here. All right. So in the foreground, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to give myself some sometimes connected, sometimes separated big watermarks. And as I go back one more layer, these are intentionally, notice I'm not copying ripple for ripple from the photograph, because when I'm out in the field, I can't do that. So I'm not copying my watermarks like, oh, there's that line there and that line there. I'm kind of mirroring what I might be able to do in the field. Now, out here in the middle distance, we have this sort of zone where there are these kind of longer and in my water, I'm making these marks horizontal. If any of my pencil strokes show through, those horizontal marks will show up. Near the far shore, I'm going to leave a zone there of white. I think I erased too much of it. Fortunately, I have the mono zero. Make sure my tip of this is clean. I'm going to give myself a little bit more. There we go. A little bit more bright along that edge. Notice how the horizontal marks in the water contrast with these vertical marks in the ground. That's saying that here's one plane, here's another plane. Final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come into these dark watermarks, and with this mono zero, pick out a few little highlights. So here I'm putting dark into the light. Here I'm going to put a few little light marks into the dark.
We have a question. Is the surface always perfectly flat, or does it curve and change with the shoreline?
Oh, we're going to be kind of getting into that in a really geeky way in a little bit. The rule of thumb is it is much more flat than you possibly think it can be. Your brain knows that that's a lake and it curves around towards you. So your brain wants to make that far side arc and curve, because if you look down at it on a map, that's what you'd see. But when you are looking across a lake, you're seeing a very straight line. And if you're looking at a river that's coming towards you, those banks, you will see more of that kind of the shores coming down towards you. But you know, even on Blackwater Pond, not a really big pond, you're going to be seeing that far side as a horizontal. So really horizontal. So here I've done this with pen. I mean, with pencil. And notice that we're getting a sense of there's light on the water. We're consistently inconsistent. Let's take a look at how we might play with something like this on a with some other medium as well. And this brings us into our next area of, we're going to add to this idea of of ripples, the idea of reflections. Reflections, the rule of thumb for reflections is look at each one of those birds that's reflected there. If you draw a line straight up from it, you see the bird that is casting the reflection. So people think that if something is, if you've got an object that's sort of bending out like this, that its reflection is going to come down somewhere like this. But an object that is here, let's put a little kingfisher on this, because who doesn't love kingfishers? The reflection of that kingfisher is going to be straight down below the kingfisher. The reflection of this stick is going to be straight down below the stick. So if the water is jiggling it, sort of where we get to that kingfisher reflection is going to be there. So reflections, you're looking straight down from objects. If I have a vertical post, it's going to be reflected vertically. If I have a tilted post, it's going to be reflected with a tilt. So from this point here, oh, let's make this a little bit longer. Okay, there we go. That's coming right down in there. Now, what is interesting is that the length, the apparent length of these is going to be different. So if something is straight in the water, and I'm looking at it close to the shore's edge, I'm going to see that reflection as being the same length in still water. If the water has all sorts of ripples, I can get all sorts of bonus little nuggets of that reflection showing up in little parts of subsequent ripples, because those ripples are taking part of the mirror and shining it back at that post. If the post is tilted towards me, that foreshortens the post, but it actually lengthens the shadow. And if the post is tilted away from me, that foreshortens the post, but it shortens the reflection. Did I say shadow? If so, ignore that. I'm talking reflections. So if something is vertical, you'll have same. If something is tilted towards me, then the post is shorter, but the reflection is long. If it's tilted away from me, the post is short because it's foreshortened, but its reflection is even shorter than the post. So if I had a post like this that was tilted away from me, its reflection is going to be shorter. So much that if an object is steeply tilted away from me, it may have little or no reflection at all. There it is. So if there is a far side of the stream and there's a steep cut bank that is vertically up from it, right? That steep cut bank gets reflected. Here's the edge of the water. There's the edge of this. But if instead of being a steep, so this one here in side view is like this. We're coming down here, here's our plants, and then we get to the water surface, right? So you see this surface reflected here. If, however, the bank comes back like that.
Could you move the page over?
Oh, yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It takes a village, doesn't it? So if my bank, here's your little friend sitting on the shore. Oh, look out there. Let's write a poem, right? They're sitting on the shore. And you're over here, you're looking at them. What you may see is here's the shoreline. Here is your friend sitting on the shore. And because this is tilted away, that means that the reflections are shorter. You may see little or no reflection of the land. You might see part of the reflection of their head sticking up here. So how do we go about drawing something like this? Here in this photograph, some of these are, so take a look at them. In this vertical one on the left, it's about the same size. So that is something that is not really leaning towards you or away from you very much at all. And so you see, here is this, go from this point in the water here. Actually, let's at this point, I'm going to make this bigger. Whoop. Right. Notice that from the water here, we're seeing these roughly the same length. Slightly, the water reflection seems to be a little bit here. This feels longer than the stick. That means that this stick is slightly leaning away from you. This one here seems about the same length. That means that this stick is not leaning towards you or not leaning away to you. It's sort of at 90 degrees to you. But so if you get the length of one of these reflections slightly wrong, what that does is it still actually works, but it would just imply to somebody else that, oh, that stick is pointing towards me or pointing away from me. So the good news is with this is you actually have a lot of wiggle room. So let's construct some of these sort of perches for cormorants. So if I have a log and it is kind of coming up and then going back down into the water, and it has a little stick that comes up on it, and has another little friend that comes down here. Here's another stick sticking out of the water. And then there's another stick here. And then we're going to have another branch of this. I don't have to get that log exactly the same shape that it is. And I'm going to have over here, there's another stick that kind of comes down like this. When I'm drawing trees and things, I'm not following it exactly. I try to get a general feeling for something, but I do realize that there will be parts where I want to kind of roughly kind of get the feeling for that. There are some trees that are really iconic, like there are ones that are looking really picturesque in Yosemite. And if you go and you make up a branch on that tree, there are artists that are out there, people out there will be like, oh, wait a minute, that one doesn't have a branch right there. But so where I'm stopping my lines, let's just sort of say that that is where this thing is hitting the water. So from then on, it's going to be the reflection. And what I'm going to do is with my reflection marks, the closer, oh, let's put a few cormorants in here. There's a cormorant sitting here. Let's have another cormorant here. And I'm going to put 2 over here. Just because life's better with cormorants. So the reflections under these, the further the mark is away from the thing, the closer it is towards you, the more it's getting into the big ripple zone. So that means that, remember, the big ripple zone is closer towards you. So this stick here, it cannot get, so I'm going to draw just sort of my thinking with this purple pencil. I'm going to drop some verticals down here. I'm going to drop a vertical down here, vertical down here, vertical down here, a vertical down here, right? This point here is here. There's these. So these little marks, this here is going to end there. See what I did? Is I just drew a little line coming out to this line, and I stopped it where I hit this line. And towards the end of it, I made it a little bit more jiggly. I also intentionally left a little bit of a white, a little bit of a break here. Very often you will, you'll see where a, where a branch might hit its reflection. Where it will hit its reflection, there'll be a little bit of a highlight right at that point there. Now, if I made this one here a short reflection, that actually still would work in the way of reflections. It's just implying that that stick is leaning away from me a little bit. The high point of this stick needs to be the low point of this reflection. This big stick here, going to come that big bird wants to, so giving it big reflection there. If I want to then turn that into a watercolor drawing, I can. So there's sort of a gray tone here to the water. I am going to mix up a little bit of gray watercolor paint. I will test my color off on the side. And it's a little bit darker than I expected. So I'm going to just squeeze my water brush slightly, put a little bit more water into my mix. And test it again. That's a little bit lighter. And now I am going to horizontal lines, horizontal brush strokes. Any of those brush strokes show through, I will get those as horizontals. Now I'll let that dry.
Jack, this is Anne Marie. We're gonna, in about 5 minutes, have a little hydration break. And I know that Yvette is getting some reflection questions that maybe she could chime in here and ask a few while you're creating this beautiful image.
Sure. Happy to take any.
I'm going to ask the questions here. So
Okay.
are the reflections lighter than the original subject? Mimi was asking about that.
Reflections are often really dark. The object out there is going to reflect water light really well, and the reflection of that off the water surface is not going to be as bright. So very often the water will be darker.
And another question, does the direction of the sun change the way the reflections behave?
The direction of the sun, interestingly enough, has no effect on the reflection. The reflection is a relationship between the object and the viewer and the reflecting surface. The shadow, however, would change. The shadow would change. Shadows can be cast on water, but shadows and reflections are very, very different things. So we'll take a look at the shadows in a little bit, but the reflection is always straight down from the object. That's a relationship between the object and you. That also means that everybody who's looking at a reflection is seeing that reflection pointing towards them, meaning that each one of us is actually seeing a different reflection, but each of us can be seeing the same shadow. My next little thought here is about color and color of the water. And the reason I put up this slide is because I've got some a photograph here of a heron, but look at the water behind the heron. The water that is close to the shore is dark greens and browns. So it is reflecting stuff by the shore. Because it's going back at an angle, it is shorter than the trees and the foliage behind it, but it's going back at an angle. So you see that reflection is shorter. Then in the foreground, you have the sky being reflected. So because we're reflecting different things, the color of the reflection is really different. The color of water can be anything that the color of water wants to be. And so a wonderful study to help you see that is, if you're going to say do a painting here of a heron, is I recommend that people do what I call a water strip. So what a water strip is just a little narrow column where you're just looking at what color is the water in this area. And how does that change as you kind of go back in this picture plane? And so in the foreground here, I have really light value water. And then I get to a place where I have squint at that really dark value, really dark value water. And it's got greens and browns in it. Test, oh, darker than that, come on. Let's just get some pigment in there. And then make it darker. I think it needs some, some dark browns put in here. So we have a tendency to try to make the water be blue. And sometimes it is. And very often it's not. And also we have the idea, because water is transparent, that it's not dark. And that is wrong. So water can be very dark. And the and so what doing just like a little study like this, a little strip, kind of will get me to, when I go about my business of painting this water, it's going to help me be able to go that dark on my water next to that light on my water, and get those colors right. A useful thing to do is just to hold up your hand with, you sort of make a little tube with your fingers. So you curl your fingers into a little tube to make yourself a little spyglass, and hold your hand up. So you're just looking at a little piece of the water. Squint at that, just hold your hand up and look at that little piece of the water. If you're out there drawing something like this, could you possibly get yourself to make water by getting something that dark. Oh, oh man, that's crazy. That's super, super, super dark. So I've got a little grebe down there, kind of scooting around, and it's got a little grebe head sticking up, and a little grebe body, kind of, oh, it's sweet little grebe, and then it's in these sort of reflections, and just having a really good grebe day. But the water around this grebe is dark, 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 dark. So if I'm going to do that, I've got to be willing to go bold, go dark, and put that in there. So I'm mixing up some really, really dark brown off on the side here. I'm gonna test. Yeah, there you go. Well, let's paint the water. I'm too light, aren't I? Let's make that darker. Start at the bottom, maybe. Horizontal strokes, if any of those show up, then they'll feel like kind of ripples. Ah, that's better. Now, I'm going to let that dry.
Jack, would this be a good time for our little hydration break?
That's a good idea. However, as you go and get some water, I'm going to suggest that just be conscious of the idea that you're drinking an emergent property of covalent bonding of hydrogen molecules, and just isn't it wonderful? Kind of just as you drink, feel that water go into you and just be amazed by the wonder of that glass of water. Give it a try. Official instruction starts in 5 minutes. Should we give people 5?
I think 5 minutes would be great. Yes.
5 minutes. See you in 5, everybody. that 5 minutes?
Not quite. I believe we have 2 more minutes.
Yeah, you see any interesting questions over there in Chatland? Or the question and answer land?
I think we already got most of the reflection questions. I apologize for missing my cue there.
Oh, no worries.
We also had another earlier question that I wasn't sure if we were answering. Brianna had asked with what we were talking about with reflection and how we see them, would it only be true if the reflected object is parallel to you?
So the if again, if there's an object that is leaning towards you, we see its shortened reflection. I mean, sorry, leaning towards you, we see it's a lengthened reflection. If it is leaning away from you, then the reflection is shortened. And if it is parallel to you, then you're getting more of the same size reflection. This is if you are close to the water's edge. Reflections are kind of a weird thing. Let's say here's your water surface. And if your eye level is here, to get to you, light is coming down and it is hitting the water surface. And if we kind of look from, here's 90 degrees up from that, this angle, this is called the angle of incidence, angle of incoming light. The bouncing off the water, this light bounces back at the same angle. That's the angle of reflection. Those are the same. The angle, so this angle and this angle are the same, the incoming. So if I move my eye down here, I'm seeing a different view of things. And now this light here that I was getting up here is now bouncing over my head. I'm only seeing light that is kind of coming in at a lower angle here. But it doesn't, but the position, so that sort of, the position of me changes how I see things, but I'm still seeing a reflection, but it will be a different reflection. I'm not sure I'm answering still answering the question that was being asked, though. But I can, but whether the post is vertical, tilted away from me or tilted towards me, or the shoreline is vertical, tilted away or tilted towards me. Again, that's changes the length of the shadow that I see. So if in side view, here's the water's edge and here's the far shoreline, and it's coming down at a very low angle here, then that's like something that is leaning away from me. And then I don't see, and let's say there's a ball right here on that shore. In order to see that ball's reflection, if I am standing over here on this shore with my head up here.
Oh, sorry, I think you have to scooch the page just a bit.
Oopsie.
There we
If
go.
I'm standing over here with my head up here, this ball's reflection is not going to reach my head here. If I wanted to see that ball's reflection, I'd have to lower my head down. So its angle of the kind of the incoming angle of its reflection would be, I'd have my head way down here.
But up here, that reflection is going to miss me. So I actually I don't see this shore's reflection. But if this were a wall here, then I'm seeing that.
So I think we're ready to start.
Okay. And while you were gone, I just played with my grebe a little bit. What I did is I just kind of came into some of this dark paint with a damp brush. And I did what's called lifting out. So if I kind of get some of my paint here wet, and I'm doing this in a horizontal line, so it'll then intentionally kind of look like a little reflection or a little ripple in the water there. I lifted that out and then painted in my little grebe with a little bit of watercolor on top of that. But there are these bright reflections of the ripples from the grebe here. So how do I handle those? I've got two great tools for lights on darks. One is well, there's three tools in your repertoire. Three. Fear, surprise, and infallible devotion to the Pope. Now, these three I can use this way. So one is I can get kind of highlights in here by lifting paint out. Depends on your paper surface and the type of paint you're using. Some paints you can't lift out, but notice that these little ripple marks that I've made here at the bottom, I'm not getting quite as bright as those reflections are. Enter these two tools. With the white pencil, if my paper is dry, I can draw right on top of that. Notice that these little ripples around the bird are very, very horizontal. I can also use gel pen, and that gives me a finer but brighter line. And so there's this other line coming around here. I'm just going to take my gel pen and draw that in. Gel pens are tricky. They will run out of ink well before they should, but they are nice because they allow you to draw on with a light line on top of a dark paper. The other thing is this Prismacolor pencil. As I use the Prismacolor pencil, I often spin it in my fingers. I start to draw and it gets dull. I spin it and I'm now working on a new kind of finer edge. So I get myself a kind of a sharper edge and it'll make kind of a better mark there. So again, the color of the water will be reflecting things that are around you. This little phenomenon here of the far shore pale zone right along there, all that takes is just a little bit of different wind blowing across there, and that surface becomes a different angled reflective surface. Now, here's one other thing. Let's take a look at sort of thinking about color. And while we're doing this, let's start to kind of think about waterfalls. This is a color that for a long time I've had trouble with, but not anymore. See that beautiful, whoops, not you. I want you. I want you and
Whoa, hey, look at that sort of turquoisey blue thing. Just recently, I've added a new color to my palette. And it is this little turquoisey looking bit right there. Oh, and now I'm just having a total brain fog moment. And the name of that color is, oh, I'll look it up in just a moment. But if you know, put it in the chat and Avea will tell me. And it is this great sort of bright, clean water on top of white sand color that is all over tropics or glacial milk, or it ends up being yes, we probably could figure out how to mix this color, but oh, so nice having it in your palette. And yes, Avea?
A few folks have answered cobalt teal blue.
Thank you. Cobalt teal blue. Get you some cobalt teal blue and your life just got a lot easier. I'm finding this hiding in patches of iridescence, and oh, it is so nice just to have that kind of waiting for me in my palette. So let's take a look at maybe let's just sort of mess with this kind of chaos and craziness. Woo, doggy. How am I gonna go about that? So if I'm drawing waterfalls, and there's going to be a little section here all about waterfalls, but here's your preview of that. What I do is I first kind of block in where my water is coming in. All right, so here's one little waterfall, and then I have another little waterfall that's over here. And then there's a little rock that sticks out, and I have another little rock that is coming down here. And then there's a big pool, and it's spilling waterfall down here. All right. All right, so if I want to make a little painting of all of this waterfall-y craziness, how do I do that? And I also want to put in my new color, which I just love. I really like this color. Let's first kind of mess with this with just graphite pencil, and then we'll get to put in the cold teal blue. Right? And so the secret to drawing a waterfall is you don't draw the waterfall. You draw the rocks around the waterfall and let those be really dark. And then you have a light waterfall. So I'm going to, let's say I've got some kind of foresty slope coming in here to the edge of my waterfall. And I have water across here. And then I have, wow, this is really cascading down here. This other kind of waterfall-y bit, and then this overlaps it. The more things that overlap in your drawing, the more sense of a depth you're going to get in your drawing. And notice that with this edge here, this is really, I'm not angling this steeply down. I'm not drawing this as a down line. This is really horizontal. This over here, really horizontal. And there's a little bit of foam splashing up here. This rock comes in here, and this is a horizontal line. This line here, I'm going to give it a little bit of texture because it's going to have some moss on it and other sorts of things that'll make it feel a little bit closer. Similarly, this is a little bit of a closer bit here. Now, contrast. If I want the water to feel dark, I'm going to, light, I want to go dark with the rock next to it. The waterfall is light because you put dark next to it.
And here is this other slope coming down here. Now I'm going to try to show depth with value here in this picture. You notice that it's easy for me to kind of cover a large area with dark here with my pencil. That's because the tip of my pencil is blunt. See that little kind of flattened edge? As I'm drawing along here, I'm keeping that dull edge so that it then makes a big broad thing here. This part here, I'm just going to put in a medium tone of light so that those things in front of it are darker. And now I'm going to have this rock in front here. I'm going to leave the edge of it a little bit light and give that a middle tone. Similarly, I'm going to leave this upper edge of this thing a little bit, not so much in here, but where it is hitting there. These lines are kind of coming down to the water. If any of those lines show up, people will then see that as, oh, this is the contour of this rock. But notice what I did here intentionally. See where this rock comes down and hits this other one? I left the top edge of this here a little bit lighter right in that area. So it helps people see that these are two different planes. I have light against dark, and then look over here where this waterfall comes in. I have dark against light. See that? Light against dark and dark against light. Where this one comes down, I'm leaving the edge of that just to have a little bit of a lighter edge. And that helps people sort of see that as, oh, there's a different shape that has kind of come in there. And what about this? As I kind of come down in this part here, I'm going to leave it a little bit lighter where it hit that dark. See, I see dark against light. And then this is going to be against lighter water. So I can actually go dark up to the edge. This is going to be dark against light. And as I'm kind of filling in this area, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to intentionally change the direction of my pencil strokes. There, come down. Now turn them again. It's going to come in here. All right. And then you sort of feel like, oh, this kind of gives you this sense of a little bit more detail. These then sort of become maybe planes of rocks. But things that are more detailed pop into the foreground. And because this is more just sort of detailed hatching, that visually pulls this rock forward in your visual plane. There's just a little bit more going on there. And this is old dark rock. Following the contour of the edge down here. So there are my rocks. If I were doing this as a as a pencil drawing, what I would do is I would give myself a few very faint marks in my waterfalls, maybe here. As we kind of get into these places where there are these turquoise pools, I'm going to put in some horizontal marks. And then my marks are going to dive down here. What I want to do is to show some of these kind of white kind of suggest some of these sort of white things and sort of show that there's a change in the plane of this as you come around here. All of a sudden it's going horizontal, 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 wow, right? But if I put too much marks into this, then it stops being a light water, and the water becomes really, really gray. But I'm going to do this with a little bit of watercolor, which is really fun.
A quick question, Jack.
Yes.
We had a question about the hardness of graphite, and I'm guessing because of the way you're able to punch in those darks that this is 2B lead, just to confirm.
You know me well. 2B is my friend. Say hello to my little friend. This is a 0.7 millimeter mechanical pencil filled up with 2B lead. So the 0.7 means it's duller, gives me these big, broad, swoopy things. This and these, and then the 2B means I get these nice, rich darks. Absolutely right. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to go from light to dark on the water here. And I'm going to first put in some of the turquoise parts, then I'm going to put some of the rocks showing through the water, and then I am going to stop. It's going to be easy to overdo it, but let's play with some of this. I'm going to take some of my cobalt turquoise color here, and I'm starting closer to where the the water that is in the foreground. And in this, my brush strokes follow the direction of the water. And I'm looking at where the white is in this, and I'm not putting marks there. And as I'm painting, my brush is slowly running out of pigment. And so that means when I get to the falls in the back, it's going to be even more ghosty. So I intentionally did this stuff in the front first. That way, as I went into the background in the painting, I would have less of that color. Now there's a little bit of some dark brown that is showing through some of these areas in here. And then if I want these rocks and surfaces to be dark, I give them some nice dark paint in here. And it's really fun, the degree to which putting light, sort of dark into paintings makes the light parts just pop out. Same thing I went first to this. Notice that this rock is darker than this rock, then the next one, then the next one back. So I went back in space, and by the time I put in a stroke in the background, my brush had lost a lot of the color in it. And so it just was much more pale. Now there's a little bit of green showing through in the foliage and vegetation here. So while this is still wet, I'm going to just mix a little bit of green into this. Mix with those darks. Maybe there's some along the edge of that. And then there's some in the far back there. This is challenging. In the back here, I want to have some green back here, but I don't want it to be too bright, or that will really pull forward.
We'd had a question asking again about with the darker hues on your page, what color did you use? And then what about those?
Oh, so this dark hue, I'll tell you, these are a few of my favorite things. This color right here is Daniel Smith Bloodstone Genuine. And when I hit it with my brush just like this, it will look like black to you. but it is this really nice brown color as it starts to kind of run out, this sort of purpley brown color. And it's much better than, let's say, if I had used neutral tint to make a black, as that kind of runs out of paint, it's just this like, oh, you used your black paint. But this, yeah, kind of, yeah. This has just this warmth to it. It's something that I really like about that color. I'm finally going to come by with a little bit more of that teal and kind of get, oh, there's a little bit of rock that you're seeing underneath the water here. Now, in this very foregroundy bit, I'm going to just put a little bit more teal in here, but not in the back because I want that to feel further back. And then I stop. No, I'm actually going to do one more thing. I'll put a little bit more green in here. And if it doesn't feel green enough, then I go and get some of my gouache. And I can put in, oh, that's too much, isn't it? Oh, ah. Oh.
The earlier green before the gouache, was the earlier green serpentine genuine, like with like maybe a hint of hookers? What would you say?
No, it was mostly oxide of chromium.
Oh, cool.
Which is fairly opaque. And so, yeah, there was a little bit of oxide. No, and there is some serpentine in there. Yes, you're right. It was both some oxide of chromium and some serpentine genuine. All right. But wait, there's more. Oh, doesn't that make you want to put the turquoise in your palette? So this was just here to remind me, like, the water could be whatever color the water darn well wants to be. And so believe the water, and it's okay to go dark. Look at these color transitions: blue, turquoise, warm, tan, and ochre. Wow. All right, so that's a place where you definitely want to start with one of those little color strips before painting this scene, because that little color transition is going to mean everything. There you go. Those color transitions. Those color strips are really, really fun, really, really useful. So this, hold on. I am. There. And now how do I get back to my one moment, please. Ah, there we go. And here, here is a scene with ripples, reflections, and also shadows. Ripples, reflections, and shadows. And so wanted just to sort of play with this a little bit. We're seeing these shadows. This dark mark in here is shadows from trees overhead. This dark mark going across right here is shadows from these trees right over here. So you see, shadows can be reflected across the water. And these shadows are going out across the water. The shadows are not pointing towards you. The reflections always point down towards you. And so if we were to try to mess with something like this, how would we go about that? And to do that, I'm going to do a little study. In this, I'm not going to get caught up in the trees. In other workshops, we'll work with trees and things, but I'm going to get from that bank down. A couple of things about this bank.
about this bank. Notice that this far side, this is fairly horizontal in here. Because you're looking at a river, these sides end up, this one here arches down towards you, but not till it gets really far on the sides of the picture. So I have my far side of the water is fairly horizontal, and then it starts to come down. On the other side, there's this other bank. And I'm going to avoid the temptation of curving it down like this towards me, of curving it, having it go like. I have in the foreground here, or sort of at the edge of the water, there's a bunch of foliage. And then the water line. Notice that the water line over there, it's really, really dark. Then I've got some reflections above that. So I've got reflections. I then have reflections of trees that I have in here. So I see a reflection of a tree sticking down here, and I see another reflection of a tree next to it here. And then there's another reflection of trees here. So I've got these reflections of trees coming down towards me. On this side, I have reflections of other trees. And then there is this shadow from trees on the bank that comes across. And then there's another shadow in the foreground that is coming around in here. So what can you do? Well, one thing you could do is, if you feel overwhelmed by this, write a poem. Another thing you can do is draw the duck. Another thing you could do is make a simplified diagram of it, and you don't have to choose to include all this information in it. But let's say you wanted to make a drawing and have it look like there's a river coming towards me with all of this cool stuff going on in it. How can I do that? Now I'm actually feeling tempted just to have a, maybe we'll see if there's some sky in there. All right, let's play with this. Let's see what happens. This strategy with watercolor is to start lighter and go darker. Start lighter and go darker. So as I squint at this, I notice some of the lightest stuff in this is where I'm looking across, and there are these, there's light reflected in the water. So I'm going to start there, and the brush that I'm going to use for this is this big flat chisel brush. And what colors am I going to go? I'm going to go for, maybe mix a little bit of this cobalty, turquoisey, tealy color, just because I like it so much. Mixing this with a little bit of, let's forget the name of my own paints, manganese blue hue. I'm going to test that out on the side, and I've got a nice light, bright color. And I'm going to, I would first kind of put that into my sky. And I'm going to put that into my water. And if anything, I could maybe, so a few little kind of horizontal strokes, smear this in, and it's going to get smeared into where those trees are. But because it's lighter, I don't have to worry, I don't really have to worry about, oh no, I've got this lighter thing in there. That when that gets covered up by those trees, I'm in good shape. Now I'm going to take some cobalt blue over here and mix it into test my color off on the side here. That gives me more of this. So coming horizontally here,
The paper is a little bit wet, so it is sort of blending with some of that paint that I already have down there. And there's almost a little bit of almost purple that I'm seeing down here. So I'm just adding a little bit of violet into that. So I've got a few kind of colors transitioning in my water. And now I am going to put in my in these trees. Take a look at those trees on the back. The light is coming from the right. So we're seeing on some of those trees, the right-hand side of them is lit up with this bright, warm spring green, and then that kind of drifts away. I'm seeing warm spring green in a strip in the grass below it on the far bank on the left. And then the rest of that green is more of a dullish, very dark value. So here's what I'm going to do. I initially was saying I'm not going to paint those trees back there. I am. I can't help it. They're pretty. So I'm going to start lighter. And I'm going with this color here. I've got phthalo yellow green in my palette. And I'm going to bring some of that in. I'm going to add a little bit of more water to this. This is a, this little water brush is kind of at the end of its life. And it's no longer really giving me a lot of water flowing down. So I have to kind of squeeze hard on it. So I'm going to start just by putting in some of these areas where there's some of these bright spring greens. There's a little strip of it down here in the water that I can see. And it kind of goes up around the side of this tree. And there's a lot of it over on the bank here. And then I am going to start to mix some browns in with these greens. And I've got this little flat brush here. The flat brushes are really useful for drawing foliage and vegetation, because what I can do is, if I take this little flat brush, there's a little plastic sleeve here. If I twist that a little bit, watch what happens with my fingers here. As I twist this, see what just happened? It just turned into this crazy swirl thing. And now that's too swirled out. I want it not quite as swirled, so be a little bit swirled. There we go. And now what I'm doing is I'm kind of bouncing this around. And I'm going to make it even darker by bringing in some of that Bloodstone Genuine, my favorite. Oh, yeah. See how nicely that Bloodstone Genuine plays with these other colors? It just says like, oh, I'm green, but I'm in shadow because I'm Bloodstone Genuine. And it just makes it feel like there's little clumps of vegetation. And that also, with this kind of slightly chunky brush, gives me those little effects and details. And then there's some foliage on this other side here. There is foliage. I'm just kind of bouncing this around in here, kind of coming out over the stream. And that wants to get a little bit darker. But we're here for drawing water and these reflections. So what am I going to do now? Kind of getting down to sort of more of the water and these reflections. Oh, well, let's let's play more with this. Look at how kind of those colors in the water, those reflections, it is more of this dull color. So I'm getting more of my Bloodstone Genuine, mixing it with some of these greens that are on the palette, and flattening my brush back out. So here's the color that I have. And what I'm going to do is I am going to make some just sort of downward strokes. Sometimes I've been saying make all your marks horizontal, but sometimes you can also kind of get away with these marks in your water being vertical like this.
Jack, we've got about 14 minutes left of our class.
Okay.
And the bright green that you used at the beginning, recall the name of that particular.
That was phthalo yellow green.
Thank
What
you.
it is phthalo blue mixed with some yellow. Right. And so I'm just going to pull some of this down. And then at the edge of the water, I'm going to get some really where that bank is in shadow. I want people to sort of see where the bank and the sort of this sort of zone where the shore is. That's a really, really important line. And so I'm putting that in with a kind of a nice dark shadow. And that was that Bloodstone Genuine again. And I'm now going to put some of these, let's see here. A little bit of the shadow across. Hold on, I'm having a hard time with my brush here. Just pulled its little cap all the way off, flattened it out, put its cap on. This is again, this one brush has sort of multiple attitudes that it does. Sometimes it can be a big mop brush like this. It can also be a chisel shape brush. I'm bringing it back to its chisel shape, so it's not squirrely tail anymore. There we go. I'm going to get some purple. And test that off on the side. I think I want it a little bit darker. Test that off on the side. And there we go. And so for that far away shadow, I am going to make a horizontal streak here. For this close one, cleaning out my brush a little bit. And I want to soften the edge of this. So I'm just taking my brush with a little bit of water in it. And now I am making kind of more horizontal marks. I made one of the one of the sort of big mistakes of where sometimes you go into paint that's already really, really wet and fiddle with it. And there we go. It's a little bit better. Now I'm going to let this dry. Or make it dry. There we go. And the final thing that I'm going to do is that in some of these drawings, I've been doing my pencil first. You notice in this one, I didn't give myself a pencil drawing. And so you end up with kind of this more impressionistic thing. Another thing you can do is start with putting down some watercolor, and you'll get some places where some of your decisions are kind of indistinct and like, what are you trying to show there? So a fun thing to do, you can do on a watercolor drawing is at the end, come along with a pen and just sort of say like, okay, here I'm going to then draw on top of this and say that this is, here is this big tree. Here is my shoreline. Here are my distant trees. And you'll find that you can get away with sort of much more sort of minimal line work with this. But you're just sort of kind of clarifying, like, here's what some of these decisions that I made with my my brush were. Then over on this shore here, I'm going to give this short sort of a dotted edge. See that this sort of zone in here, those are kind of grassy edge things. And I'll let some of my trees escape the edge of the frame there. Now let's put that duck in.
Jack, we're at our 5-minute mark.
All right. So, the final thing that I want to point out is or just sort of to kind of review a few ideas. One big thing is that getting the colors in your water is counterintuitive because we all know that water is clear and water is supposed to be blue. Reflections turn that on its head. The other thing that is really useful is the shape of the shoreline. And distant shorelines are going to be much more horizontal than you think they should be. Much more horizontal than you think they should be. Your brain knows that those are going to wrap around, but they're really not. Reflections, see these down lines, are different than shadows, which can be cast across that. You can still see those reflections in the shadows, but those are fundamentally different things.
The reflection is a relationship between you, the viewer, the object that is being reflected, and the position of the sun. It's a relationship between you, the reflecting surface, and the object. The shadow is a relationship between the sun, the object, and the shape that and the surface of the water that it's being cast upon. So those are different things, and that you can include all of that in your sketch. We looked at waterfalls.
Again, the idea with the waterfall is that if I want my water to be dark, to be light, if I draw my waterfall in and draw my water, I've just made my waterfall really, really dark. If I want to have a waterfall, the secret to drawing waterfalls is not to draw the waterfall. You draw the rocks next to the waterfall. And very often, waterfalls will really darken the land near them. And that gives you, this one comes out to a little pool here. Now I'm going to go with a different direction of my pencil strokes. That gives you your waterfall. A few little, very minimal, intentional marks in your waterfall. You can get away with that.
So these strategies can help you play with water.
And what you'll find is that adding water to your sketchbook is fast, it's fun, it's soothing and relaxing to be in the presence of water. And why not let that be something that you let into your nature journal?
We are at our 1 minute mark.
I want to thank everybody for joining us today. The funds which we received today through your generous donations, we're going to be turning around and giving that out to members of our community in the form of micro grants to help take this activity of being nature journalers. And so for people who are doing projects or have special needs that we can help with, the Wild Wonder Foundation is going to be helping our community of educators and of journalers just do more and more wonderful stuff. If you are able to make a donation to support this effort, we greatly appreciate that, and that and we will do, whoops, I somehow and we are going to be taking those funds and we're going to be turning them around in the community and just doing some terrific stuff with that. We want to enable more people to be makers and creators and stewards of nature and natural systems. We thank you for being here. We thank you for being part of this. And we look forward to more adventures with you going forward. I hope that some of the strategies and ideas that you saw in today's workshop are things that you can incorporate into your own nature journaling practice, and that you are inspired to go out and explore with your journal in your hand and fall in love with this beautiful world. By doing this, we further motivate ourselves to become stewards of nature, to protect these resources. And we invite you to be part of this community actively working to do just that.
Thank you so much, Jack.
Hey, everybody. We're really grateful that you're here. I would also like to thank Avea and Anna Marie for behind the scenes, working with us to make this happen. And look forward to seeing all of you again in future Wild Wonder events.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Yuvea.
Stay hydrated.
That's right. Stay hydrated, everybody. And go out and play with this. You can do this. Thank you all.